Hello. I've got strict instructions to stay within this circle right here. I'm super excited to be here. As Drew told you, today's theme is genius. Drew said I didn't have to work it in because it was so short notice. I'm going to come back to that at the end of the talk and try and talk about what I think genius is. So really quick, I'm going to give 3 slides, say who I am, why I'm up here talking, and then I'm gonna rewind and tell that same story in more detail, and hopefully you can get some nice takeaways. So, I live in Shoreview. I have a neurotic puggle. I walk him every day so that he's less neurotic. When I walk, I have a tendency to pick up nature. It piles up in my house. So one day, I had the idea that I was looking for a creative challenge and that I would start to photograph it. I chose a very stark white background. I started posting those photos to a blog called Still in 2012. After days and days of doing that, the images built up. 2.5 years later, Target called and said, let's do some bedding, let's do some soft goods together. 3 months later, West Elm called and said, we'd like to put your images on wall hangings. And so that's it in a nutshell. That's a story I'm going to tell you how that came to be. So, oops. Let's rewind back to the beginning. I'm going to tell that same story in more detail and try and pull out some of the interesting turning events that led to all that. So first, a little bit about who I am. I'm a Minnesota native. Spent the first 15 years, went to UW-Madison for undergrad, spent the first 15 years of my life as an adult life as an aerospace engineer, working at Honeywell's research center. Went into that because I was good at math, not because it was a passion calling. But I super enjoyed it for that, like the time. But then it was time to have kids. All the global travel was getting in the way. And so eventually when Honeywell was acquired by another corporation, it was an opportunity to get out and focused on raising kids for the next 10 years. So I call that Act 2 of my life. And then when the kids got older, my oldest just went to college last year, you start to you have free time. And so I wanted to think about what that next act of my life would look like. I wanted it to be creative. And I got absorbed with this notion of a daily creative challenge that you'll learn about. So one day we were, we were in a rented house in southern France, which is kind of part of the story because I had time. I was, just sort of wasting time on the internet. And I came across this very exact slide. I think I was in Pinterest. It said, do good work, put it where people can see it. And, it's such a simple slogan, but it hit me like that, I've been creative all my life. And I have shelves full of art journals in my home. I have a hard drive full of terabytes full of images in my home, but nobody could see it. I wasn't putting it where people could see it. So I decided that I wanted to give myself a 1-year challenge. I would do a daily creative exercise, but the big thing for me is I was going to put it where people could see it. So in this case, it was a blog. So I had to formulate the project somehow, and I looked around my environment. These are my Instagram photos. This is my home. You can see a lot of Scandinavian influence, very white, very bright. Just to give you an idea of settings. So this is, my aesthetic. This is my setting. This is my home. not just, near nature, but actually in it. And I still walk the dog every day, and I still pick up bits of nature when I walk. So the question was, how can I fit all those elements of my life together, define a creative project? And the important part is that I knew we still had kids at home. It was a busy household. We're self-employed, which you know what that means. Just a busy household. And so whatever I came up with had to fit in around the edges of daily life. And so what I came up with, it was a popular thing on blogs a while ago, and it's still very popular, and I still highly recommend it, is this idea of a daily creative challenge, a daily illustration, or a daily pattern, or a daily collage, or in my case, a daily photo of what I found on my daily walks. So to test the idea, I took, I was in southern France when I had that aha moment, and this is a wild teasel. It's a thistle that grows naturally there. And I had it sitting on my counter, because I pick up nature when I walk, and I put it on my journal. Just opened the journal, used the journal as the white background, took a photo. That was a photo, and I was like, I like this. Like, I can do this. So this is going to be my daily creative challenge. So came back from France, had a friend of mine design a blog for me, very minimal. You remember that Scandinavian aesthetic. So white on white, very minimal, full functionality, but it's all buried under one layer. So when you hit the landing page, it's just an image. And then on January 1st, I think in calendar years, I don't know, it was a one-year challenge. On January 1st, I started my first post. And so it went really great for a while. I was just taking my walks, photographing things I find on my walks. But then it's January in Minnesota. I started a nature blog. Like, who does that? Honestly, after 2 weeks, I ran out of stuff. Everything's buried under 2 feet of snow. So anyway, eventually spring came and the snow melted, and then it got so much easier, and spring happens really fast. So my setup is very, very simple. Matter of fact, when I started the blog in 2012, I didn't even have a tripod. I show a tripod here with a camera on a joystick. That I got 2 years into the blog. So I just started with a middle grade Canon camera and download my images to an iMac, Photoshop them to get that bright white background, and post. So the whole thing fits. I take a walk with the dog in the morning, find something to photograph, kind of lay it on my desk until mid-afternoon. At some point, I'll put it on the white paper, I'll photograph it. It takes, depending on how ambitious I am that day, anywhere from 5 to 50 minutes. But it can take as little as 5 minutes to photograph it. And then right before bedtime, I upload it to the blog. So it fits. It didn't disrupt the family rhythm at all. Matter of fact, it quickly became part of our family routine, part of our lifestyle that everybody participated in. Joe would ride my family's all here, by the way, including my mom. There's my husband. And my mom's neighbor. It's very cute. But Joe's 13. When I started, he was 8. He'd ride his bike to school. He'd come down the driveway, usually dangling something from his handlebars. Mom, I found this for you to photograph. So it just became part of the family routine right away. Very easy to do. So spring turns to summer, summer turns to fall. Fall is super easy. You can trip over yourself to, but then it turned into winter again. And winter is hard. It's really hard. There's only so many brown twigs you can do. But after the first winter, I started to see beyond the ordinary and see what's there. And in the end, honestly, winter's my favorite. But I have that minimalist bent, so I really like those spare photographs of the brown twigs. So I do this every day, every single day, quietly on the internet for 2 years. And after 2 years, I had a significant body of work, and that surprised me. It's like, just quietly doing this thing. So meanwhile, while I'm doing this, while the family is starting to participate, everybody's more aware, just more aware of their daily surroundings, looking for subjects every day to bring home, to photograph. I'm doing something else that's really important, which is I'm participating in the online community, the online creative community. So my web designer I'd mentioned, I asked him to do this really minimal blog. Anyone who's done minimalism in their home or on the internet knows it's harder to do than not. It looks easy, but it's incredibly hard to do. So he looked at my white piece of paper with a photograph on it and said, yeah, I can do that, and then, it turned out to be a very challenging blog to do, to put all the functionality layers and layers deep so that we could have this spare white landing page. So, and as a thank you to him, I nominated him for his web design, his blog design. He won, or the blog won, I should say, for its, quote, perfect minimalism. And once you get one of these places picks you up, they all do, it's one of those things. So within a day or two, I went from having 100 visitors a day to thousands. Now they weren't photographers, they weren't nature lovers, they were designers coming to look at somebody else's work that had gotten recognition. But so they didn't all stick around, but they stayed. But what happened is Design Sponge saw that. And at the time, Design Sponge was a huge blog with like 300,000 visitors a day, 1 million unique visitors a week. And so as soon as Design Sponge saw the blog, they contacted me, said, do you want to be featured? This was all new territory to me. I said, sure, didn't know any idea what it meant. But once Design Sponge posted their feature, Martha Stewart Living called 3 weeks later, said, can we feature you? And it just snowballed from there. So a lot of press. My technique, as I got more and more press, I didn't want people just to land and see like twigs and pine cones. So I upped my game. So my 5 minutes of photographing turned into 50 minutes some days. But I was still, a lot of days. Again, my penchant is for the minimalist. But I tried to get more ambitious so that when people landed on the site, they were rewarded. I got very after your daily practice, I got very into telling stories about place using these photographs. This is my commemoration of the Minnesota North Woods. We spent a lot of time in southern France. This is my commemoration of one 3 or 4 month stay in southern France. And as time went on, I could get, I would gather these things, and then, like the feathers, the stones, the rocks, the shells, I would save them and collect them. So then I could start to do more interesting compositions, for example, by color or by kind. Eventually, I started out with one piece of tag board on the ground and a camera on a tripod. And eventually, I grew. This one, I think, took 9 pieces of, poster board, tag board on the ground. So really, that Puggle is the whole reason for all of this, because he needs a daily walk. I mean, truly, this is what started all of it. So as time went on, my collections got bigger. I could start to go meta. I could make a feather of feathers. People responded to that thing. This was my life-size portrait of my son, Joe. He's 13 now, but he was 12 in that picture. I had him lay down, traced him, and then filled it in with my collections. So the important thing is that day after day after day, it was a daily commitment, and it could have felt like a job, or it could have felt like a burden, but it never did. It was play. Every day I did it. Every day I got to do it. It was pure play, and that was important, and partly because it didn't disrupt anything. I didn't have to stop family life and say, Mom's got to make still blog. It just seamlessly fit in around the edges. The other thing I was doing at this time is putting my work where people could see it. Remember, that was my aha moment. So every morning, I'd post at night before I went to bed to the blog. It refreshes in the middle of the night. Every morning I got up and I would pin it to Pinterest. Just to a board on Pinterest, but now if you go to Pinterest, you will see these images everywhere. So I was also eventually I was getting so many questions about how do you get your white background, what kind of camera do you use, blah, 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 that I was a very late comer to Instagram, but I thought, oh, I can show people my setup, my process on using Instagram, and so that's what I do. If anyone wants to follow me on Instagram at Mary Jo Hoffman, I'll do a lot of just showing my setup, which is really, piece of tag on the floor with a tripod, but it gets more interesting than that sometimes. So, but I was putting my work where people could see it. The other thing I did is I made some prototypes. Printing digital images on textiles was a fairly new technology. You could do it online at a company called Spoonflower. I just did it just to play. Uploaded images, don't know anything about textiles, don't know anything about pattern making or doing repetition, so I didn't. I just uploaded a single image and had them send me a yard of each material. And I made pillows and tea towels, and that actually is this is the fateful event that changed, me from doing this for a few hundred people who woke up every morning with a cup of tea, pulled up Still Blog, and to getting a phone call from Target. So this was December 31st, 2014. So I've been doing the blog now for 2 full years. It's New Year's Eve. I'm at home sitting in front of the fire because I don't feel well. I've got a flu or something, and I put this photo on Instagram, and I say, I can't read it. I say, I'm walking out of the circle, the zone. I can't read it there. Anyways, I say, I'm sitting here in front of the fire. It's New Year's Eve. This is a nice time to make some goals for the coming year. Goal number 1, have a national retailer pick up a line of Still products. I was being cheeky because I don't have a shop button. I hadn't ever I hadn't sold any. I wasn't doing this to do a shop or to sell anything. It was just I had the picture. I said that. So one of my followers replied and said, I used to work at Target, which is not so unusual in Minnesota, and said, do you mind if I forward this to my old boss? I said, no, of course not. So 1 hour later, Target calls. And, hi, this is Jason. I just spent an hour looking at your blog. I think we should know each other. And so he said, let's have coffee. I said, okay. Kids are home from school. I have a cold. How about after they go back on the 5th of January? He said, sure. Then he calls back 2 days later, and he said, you know what? No time for coffee. Can you make a product pitch? I said, yes. And I said, what's a product pitch? I did. I waited. I said yes, and when would you like it, and all this. And then I said, what is a product pitch? So I spent, he said, how much time do you need? I don't know what a product pitch is, so I said a week. He said, take 10 days and come in. So I did. And 10 days is not enough time to get more fabric printed and mailed to me and sewn into products. So I had the few products I'd made, and so I just started photoshopping my images. It was the soft goods department. So I just started photoshopping my images on literally every soft goods thing I could think of. And when I didn't have the skills to Photoshop it onto the bedding, I used the power of suggestion, so it works, so you can see. So I went in, we did the product pitch. By the end of the pitch, it was clear that they were sold. So they said, go home, do 16 collections, and we'll pick 8 and run with them. So that was that meeting was in January. I went back with my 16 collections in March, and by July, I went to the warehouse in downtown Minneapolis, and we down-selected to 8. They down-selected to 8 collections, and I got to walk in the warehouse and see my bedding, soft goods lines, and that was one of the most fun moments of that whole adventure. It was far more fun than launch day, I was a wreck. So anyways, 8 collections by color. How am I doing on time, guys? I'm okay? All right. So Target, I knew Target would take their sort of PR, marketing, calendar photos, but I knew if I wanted my online community, remember I was participating in the online community, if I wanted them, my fellow bloggers, to feature my products, there's no way they would put catalog quality imagery on their blogs. So I was going to have to supply them with much more interesting blogs. This is my backyard. And so I hired Martha McQuaid and Dan Clark. Martha's here today. I rented their studio and hired Martha as a creative director, and we went into her studio for one day, a long day, 12-hour day, and we made magic in one day using our bedding to photograph the collection so that my online blogging friends would be proud to feature them. That's Alec. Alec is here. I saw him. Yeah, there's there's Martha and Alec sitting together. That's my daughter Eva, by the way, and she's here. And this is so fun because I just happened to have, by accident, Target had given me samples, and I had 2 shower curtains that were the same. So we were like, wouldn't it be cool to make like a tunic and have somebody stand in front of it, And Martha, if you don't know Martha McQuaid, you might want to. She's like, I can do that. She goes, literally, she doesn't even use the scissors. Rip, and then within minutes, she had a tunic and Eva stood there, and it was a perfect match. I mean, it was just it was a really fun day, but it was exactly what the blogging community wanted, because they were proud to feature these. It didn't look like they were doing a product pitch. So friends like Victoria at SF Girl by Bay, my friend C at French by Design, they were happy to feature it because the photos were consistent with their blogs. Okay, very quickly, West Elm called, totally different experience. They just wanted 36 images. I did not co-design at all. One day, 7 days before launch, the products show up. I've never seen them. They had told me it was going to be acrylic with gold frames, and I'm thinking, oh my God, that's awful. Yeah, I mean, really, doesn't that sound awful? But then I took them out of the box. I was like, oh, they're cool. Look at that, because the acrylic, it makes it like a shadow box. So that's my original image there on the left, and that's kind of flat, and the bright white background flattens it out, and you put it in the acrylic, and it makes it 3D again. So, okay, that's my story. I've got a few more slides here. I'm going to go really quick. The images are used every day. I get requests every week to put my images on just about everything. I would have never thought that when I started drinking water in Japan. Lots and lots of book covers. These happen to be in the United Arab Emirates, lots in Britain. This was a gay pride poster in Serbia. If for any of those who've followed me on Instagram for a long time, that's Glimmer, and when she was a chick. The film festival in Orca, that turned into T-shirts, and then they turned into cups, and it just goes on. And just so many tattoos. Feathers and tattoos, yeah, lots and lots of tattoos. Ironically, no one's picked up wrapping paper yet. I'm trying to find a home for that, maybe even wallpaper. So what's next? And all that happened last year. And I think in calendar years, like I said, in January this year, I started photographing things on black just so I could learn some new skills. Those are being used, but differently, mostly for interior design or textiles. That's a client of mine that bought some images and put them in a restaurant hotel. And I also started a series of doing collages, a collage a day, which their whole lesson learned in there. So here's my takeaway: do good work, put it where people can see it, and show up every day, day after day. Now I want to read one thing. I'm going to tie this back to genius. So, the most important commandment is to show up every day at your studio, your desk, work table, shop, easel, loom, laptop, lathe, keyboard, sewing machine, or workbench. In fact, if there's any part of this talk that ties into the theme of genius, it is the idea of dailiness. Most of us will never make world-changing mental leaps to conclusions like E equals MC squared. We are not that kind of genius. But there is a quiet kind of genius in the daily accumulation of skills. Go watch a mason lay bricks someday, or a computer programmer code an app, or a chef create a menu. Or, as I have done, watch Martha McQuaid make a tunic out of a shower curtain in 7 minutes. You watch something like that and you think, that's genius. I could never do that. But neither could any of them until they did. And they got there, so can you, by showing up. And then showing up again and again, the next day and the day after that. So as I stand here, today is day 25, month 8, year 6 of Still Blog. If you do the math, I did that last night, it's 2,063 images. And some of them are pretty good. Some of them are just okay. Some of them got picked up by Target. Some of them got picked up by Wellstelm. And some will only ever appear on an Image a Day blog, on a Quirky Nature blog by a Minnesota artist. And tomorrow I'm going to make image 2064.